Hey everybody, I'm Lisetta Oropesa. Today's video is going to be one that I've been wanting to make for a really long time, and it is to share with you guys some of my methods that I have picked up over the years about learning new roles. I've been able to come up with a few things that have helped me learn stuff a lot more efficiently that you can kind of do on the side when you're also performing other repertoire. So, and I get this question from you guys a lot because I know that a lot of young artists will, take on a new Mozart role for the first time and they kind of are overwhelmed because they're like, oh my God, Susanna or Leporello or whatever. These are long roles. There's so much recit. What am I going to do? How am I going to put all this in my brain? How did you learn it? And I'm like, at the time when I first learned it, I was still in college and I was able to only focus on that, but it did take me a long time. And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way of learning stuff. And now I go back and I learn things a little bit differently. So that's my little intro for this. So let's get into it. The real motivation for making this video, on top of the fact that you guys ask me about this kind of stuff all the time, is that I have just been given a role assignment a year ago to come and sing Manon at the Metropolitan Opera. Now, Manon by Massenet, I have the score right here. I have two scores, actually. It's a very long opera. It's 5 acts. And this is a humdinger of a role. Now, I've sung very long roles before. I'm not afraid of singing long roles. I've sung several Handel parts. I have sung Susanna and the Marriage of Figaro. I have sung lots of roles that go on and on and on. However, a role like Manon, when I first looked at the score, I was like, ooh, this is going to be tough because the text almost never repeats itself. The rhythms are complicated because the downbeats are never where you think that they are, and the opera's quite long, and she sings in every act, and she has several arias that are all extremely difficult, and the registers are high, low, high, low, high, low. So this particular opera provided extreme challenges for me, and this is where I put every single one of my how to learn a role methods into play. So the very first thing that I do when I get a role is I take a look at it from beginning to end and I get an idea of the arc of the character. How often is this person on stage? How much do they sing alone? How much do they interact with others? Are they in every single act? Do they have a whole act break, for example? Because that makes a difference. Sometimes your character is like at the very beginning and then at the very end. That's a challenge in and of itself. So I always try to get an idea of what my character's arc is. How often are they there and what are they going through? Where are they coming from and where are they going? And I establish this in my mind by going through the entire text of the piece. Before I even listen to a recording, I go through the text of the piece as though it were a play. And I read every single line, every single character, including non my own, everyone. Now, you'll note, operas are not always in English or in your native language. I'm very fortunate that I speak a lot of French. So this cuts my practice time in half, and it will do the same for you. This is my Please Learn Your Languages advertisement. It will help you so much, not just in your singing and your interpretation and your expression, but also in your ability to actually do the job. When you get to the theater, the international cast that you likely have, with the conductor or director that may or may not speak English to you, the fact that you'll be in a foreign country sometimes. For all of these reasons, it's tremendously helpful to be a speaker of the native languages of the country where you're going to be, France, Italy, Germany. These are the ones I'm kind of thinking of, like for the operatic languages, if you will, to be conversational in those. But also when you're practicing and when you're learning your music, the better you are at French, the faster you're going to learn Manon. So I thank my lucky stars that when I was a young artist and when I was a college student and even growing up, I took language classes very seriously. So that's my little rant on that. That being said, it helps me tremendously that I don't have to sit here word for word with the dictionary. I can actually read every line of this text, and once in a while I'll hit a speed bump and go, what the heck does that mean? And look up that word and write that little word down. But if you're not at that level yet, my suggestion to you is to spend as much time of your young years working on languages so that you can get to the point where you can read the text and follow the story. After I've done that, I mark out my acts, and my points where my character has their major entrances. If I know I'm in rehearsal and the conductor wants to rehearse a scene, they'll probably say, okay, let's start with the duet you know, the Sans-Sulpice duet, for example, because I know it's going to be one of these tabs. So I don't have to go to like, okay, let's see, that's in Act 3, that's about 30 pages in. No, I can just find my little tab. That's helpful for me, but you know, that's just maybe hyper organization. But I do this with every single one of my scores. So those are the first kind of little bookwork things that I do. Translation, and I know the arc of my character. The next step, I suppose, in actually learning a role is deciding whether or not you are able to listen to a recording, you are willing to listen to a recording, or you want to just go ahead and get to the nitty-gritty. But my point of view on them is, I do think it's helpful to hear the scoring, the way that the piece is scored for the orchestra, because you aren't going to get that with a piano on your own with a coach. It's very helpful to hear what the orchestra is doing, what instruments are playing when, how thick is the orchestration, how differently, you know, a piccolo sounds from a trombone. I mean, it's going to just be different with a piano. So it is super helpful to hear that. It's also super helpful when you're learning ensembles, duets, you know, trios, finales, to hear what the chorus is doing, to hear what the other characters are doing, because inevitably you'll be practicing on your own and you just won't get that in your ear unless you have a recording to listen to. And it's also nice to know if you have singers that you admire, that you enjoy, whose voices you feel are similar to your own. And the reason I say this is because we imitate, whether we like it or not, we imitate what we listen to on recordings we imitate what we listen to everywhere. I think all singers do it. It's an instinctive part of how we learn. It's how we learn languages. It's how we sing. It's a normal thing. But because you do that, be aware of who you listen to when you're listening to your recordings. Because if you start to imitate a voice type that may not be ideally suited to you, what you can actually do, what you're capable of doing, you might find yourself manufacturing sounds that aren't natural for you. Always go to your teacher and work on vocal things with your teacher if technically you need work on something. I do listen to recordings to get an idea, like I said, of the orchestration, get an idea of the kind of progress of the piece, and get an idea of what different conductors maybe have kind of done. Because just because a tempo marking says allegro, quarter note equals 100, you might get a conductor that doesn't want to do quarter note equals 100, and you're going to hear 4 different recordings and the quarter note will never be 100. So it might be, it might not be. So you might get used, if you get used to hearing one recording that does it at quarter note equals 80 instead of quarter note equals 100, and then you go to another recording and it's quarter note equals 120. Neither of those is going to be correct for that particular moment that you're working on. So get it in your head, know that you have to be flexible. This is why I always say prepared but neutral. I do pull away from the recording pretty soon after I've heard it once or twice through to get an idea. I pull away immediately and I don't refer to the recordings again until much later in my practice. The next thing that I do is I tackle the most difficult parts of the role. And for me, those tend to be the ensembles and the recitatives. I find that those just need the most work. Recits are language heavy, they are quick usually, they're not measured in a way, they're often not even melodic, and so those are the kinds of things that you're going to need to practice and drill over and over and over and over again. They're tedious and they take much longer to learn than the beautiful arc of the aria. That happens to be the part that you're probably going to be the most interested in singing, the part that everybody's waiting for you to sing when you get there. Of course, that's very true, but I always find that the most time of my day should be devoted and ends up being devoted to learning my recits and learning my ensembles. Ensembles are hard to learn on your own because you can't work with the tenor all the time, he's not around. You can't work with the chorus all the time, or whoever else is on stage with you. But it's important that you know where he is all the time, what the other character is doing all the time, so that you can react, so that you can listen for cues that will help you, that you can pick up on, because you're not always going to be able to count. I count a lot. I'm not a dancer or anything, but I learned music by counting. I was an instrumentalist for a really long time. I was the drum major of the band here in Baton Rouge. By the way, this is my house. Hi, this is my office. I almost never get to learn music here, but I'm always happy when I do. But anyway, I grew up in an instrumental ensemble, in band, in orchestra, so I'm a counter. Now for MANON and roles that are written by French composers, I find counting extremely important and helpful because a lot of the times the stresses are not on the downbeats that you think that they are. So like if I'm listening to a recording, I'm like, this sounds like it's in 4, but it isn't. What time signature is this in? Let me look at my score. Oh, it's in 12/8. Oh, okay. Well, let me just figure that out in my brain because that's going to be different. It's going to be notated differently. I'm going to be counting. The rhythms are going to be different. So that's the other thing about recordings. You don't have a conductor to watch. So having the score in front of you going, oh, that's in 4/4, even though it sounds like maybe it's in 12/8, it's actually in 4/4. So I need to think about the quarter notes. I need to think about the eighths. I need to subdivide differently. All those things. This is why the score is everything. The score is the Bible. When you finally get to the point that you can start working on your arias, or you decide to start working on your arias and hopefully take them to your teacher and sing them through and get them into your voice and all that stuff, I always leave that for last. At least when I'm learning a part and I break it up into chunks, the aria is always kind of the last part that I work on because it's the part that I learn the fastest. The only time that I would suggest that you really spend a lot of hard work time on your arias is when you're learning Baroque music and you have to sing da capo. Then you have to learn variations and you essentially have to learn the aria twice. And you have to sing lots of them. So for that, 86 that advice and go ahead and start working on those arias. So a few of the kind of weird off-the-cuff things that I do but I find tremendously helpful are the following 4 things. Number 1, I record myself. Now, I don't mean recording myself in a lesson. I do that when I can get with a coach or with a voice teacher, with my voice teacher. But I record myself just like this on my little voice memos or any other small recording device that you can get on your phone. Count speak singing, kind of. So in other words, there's a very particular example I can give you that in Manon, there's an interaction that she has with Le Comte Desgrieux, which is Desgrieux's father, the bass. And they have this whole interaction where they're speaking back and forth to each other. And it's not really a duet. It's not really recit. But there's like a 8-page little encounter that she has with this guy where they're having this little discussion. And I found it very difficult to learn because it's not the kind of thing that just kind of sings itself. So I was like, God, how am I going to get this? Okay, I'm going to record myself. This is what I do whenever I come across a weird little chunk of music that's like a link to some other more melodic piece of music. So I would literally count, I go, and I always try to do it in key. Even if I'm down an octave, I try to do it in key. So like this is in G major. So do, mi, so, mi, do, so, do. Do being movable do, not fixed do. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. So dun 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 dun. Pardon, mais j'étais là, près de vous, à 2 pas. 2, 3. J'entendais malgré moi. 2, 3. Je suis très curieuse. I literally did that for this entire little thing. It sounds ridiculous. It's so silly, but when I am in the car or when I have my headphones on and I'm doing something else, I can pop that bit on and listen to that one little challenging chunk. I don't need to do the whole opera, the whole roll like that, but I do it for bits that are weird, that don't really sing themselves, where I have to hear his interaction and then I have to come in after, and then I sing his part too. Faut-il donc savoir tant de choses? Even if it's not in pitch, to just sing his rhythms and his text so that I know what he's saying. And I go, okay, yes, then he says this. And then I say, you know what I'm saying? Just because it helps me get my cues, it helps me learn my part a heck of a lot better. The second thing that I almost always do when I'm learning a part, and I do this without even meaning to sometimes, is I conduct. I have a very good photographic memory. I do have to say, I memorize so much by just looking at it, but if I put it into my body, if I physicalize it in some way with a gesture, like conducting, a gesture that's actually musically helpful for me, I find that I just learn it so much faster. I learn it so much easier. And I remember, oh yeah, this bit goes from 3/4 to 9/8, which makes a difference. 3/8 to 4/4 a little bit later. And suddenly there's like a place where we have to slow down, ritenuto right here, and then we speed back up. It helps me so much if I know what beat this is on or whatever. Just as I'm going through it, I find that it helps me tremendously. The third thing that I like to do that I think is a little weird but super helpful for me is that I work backwards. So when you're memorizing, if you start from the end of any section and work backwards. You're going to memorize it twice as fast if you know where you're going, because you know the next bit because you started backwards, you know? So if I'm starting from, you know, and I did this in choir actually here at LSU. I start from this page. I go, okay, start from the Allegro agitato. We're going to learn all this. Okay, now we're going to go back to this section, starting from the, here, the tempo 1, okay. Okay, now I know the Allegro agitato because I've been working on the Allegro agitato for a while. Okay, now we're going to go work on this next section, starting from the andante espressivo. Okay, now I'm going to learn this. Then I go to the tempo 1. Then I go to the Allegro agitato. Do you know what I'm saying? So working in that order, rather than the opposite, which is start from the beginning. Okay, I have this rested. Okay, I got it. Now what's the next bit? Okay, yeah, that's the next. Okay, I'm going to start this rested again. Okay, I got that. Okay, the next bit. Wait, how does that go again? You know what I'm saying? I just find it's more helpful. The fourth kind of weird, wacky thing that I like to do that I find extremely helpful is that I write down my text. Now, a little bit of background info before I get to exactly what I do. Make sure that you have a literal translation in your score, or at least in your brain, so that you know word for word what you're saying. It's one thing to have a poetic translation that you've read, and this is why it helps to learn your languages. But if you haven't learned your languages, or even if you have, you should know ideally what your character says every second, literally, the literal translation of what they're saying. What tense they're in. Are they in past tense? Are they in present tense? Are they in the future? Are they talking about something that's literally happened to them or not literally? You know, is it subjunctive? All these kinds of things matter in the way that you color and express your text. And they help you as far as phrasing in general, because then you can choose exactly how you're going to sing something. It's not just mouthing words anymore. It becomes an actual sentence in that language. So a poetic translation might be great for you in your native language in your head to get an overall scope. But when you're actually having to sing the text, the word for word is extremely important so that you come across much more native in your pronunciation, native in your expression, and also it just helps you find beautiful colors in your voice for that language that are super fun and that are only specific to that language. And I think that's one of the nicest things about getting to sing in French, and specifically because French has so many vowel sounds that you get to really enjoy. So with all that said, word for word, after I have gotten to the point where I've been working on the role for like maybe, I don't know, a month, and I've had a good amount of time to really go through it, I've sung through it all a bit, and I'm kind of starting to memorize, that's when I start writing down my text. I literally take a piece of paper, close my score. I have it near me, but not open. And I start writing down my text. So I'm like, okay, so my first entrance, I know the very first thing she says is, vous, mon cousin, embrassez-moi. And I write it down in French, word for word, exactly right. And I try to make sure that it's spelled right. Everything is exactly right. This is why literal word for word is super important. And then I know she says, ah, mon cousin, excusez-moi. Je suis encore tout étourdi, etc., etc., etc. And I literally write the entire text in order, repetitions and everything. Repetitions and everything. Now, it sounds redundant and stupid, but it is one of the most helpful things I've ever done. It takes time, it's a pain, it's tedious, but getting it right, it's kind of like when we used to spell. Do you guys remember when we used to have to spell? We used to have to spell words in spelling class and actually spell them 10 times. Repetition of writing, and that's how you learn to spell. You didn't learn to spell by using spell check. You learned to spell by writing down how to spell disappointed, whatever the word was, you know, 10, 15, 20 times, whatever. And that's how we learn to spell, and we never forgot how to spell. Well, that's how I learn my text. That's how I memorize my text better than any other way, is I write the whole damn thing down, beginning to end, repetitions and all. In French, accents where they're supposed to be. That also helps strengthen my French, and it helps strengthen all the languages that I work in. So I totally recommend that. That's probably the best of all the things that I do. That is the most helpful one that I would say. But don't do it at the beginning. So I don't do it when I'm still kind of learning the text. I do it when I can close my eyes and I remember the text. So I don't do it right away, because then I'm just copying and I'm stopping every 2 seconds. It doesn't help me. I need to be at the point where I'm flowing in my brain what's being said. Then I can write it down. Another thing that's helpful is to actually speak that text poetically as though you were reciting in a play. No, not even in rhythm. In rhythm is helpful if you want to learn rhythms. If you don't need to learn rhythms and you just want to get the text solid and you have a little time to do that, just speak the text. Je suis encore tout étourdi. Je suis encore tout engourdi. Ah, mon cousin. Excusez-moi. Whatever. It helps me. Actually, it's kind of hard to do. But I can't tell you how many times I have been in a situation, oh gosh, at least half a dozen, where a director has said, okay, let's sit around a table and read this like a play. Or, not even on a table with your score near you, let's stand around on stage and walk it like a play. And just, you guys block yourselves naturally the way you would as if this were a play. And you have to actually speak your text, no singing. That happens, I promise you, okay? So I want to describe a little bit about two types of practicing that I experience that I think you need both. At least I find that I really need both. And that is concentrated practice and distracted practice. Concentrated practice is when I am in a room, no distractions, no social media, no television, no noise, no whatever, and I'm just the piano, the score, my pencil, a metronome, and me, and that's it. No recording, nothing. I'm just going through the score, the hard, 1, 2, la drôle de fille, whatever, and I'm like fingering the music on the piano or whatever it is. That is concentrated practice. That is the most ultimate form of doing nothing other than learning music. And that's if you're just kind of plucking out notes. And then when you're practicing it, you're repeating it. You're doing it over and over and over and over. Maybe you're singing full voice, maybe you're not. A note on that. I don't sing full voice too early on in the process. I wait a little bit because I find that instead of like singing every phrase from the first time, unless I'm sight reading super well that day and I'm feeling a great voice and I can just sing for an hour and a half and do nothing else, I do that. But in general, I'd rather just save my voice and just get it in my brain first. And then when my brain knows what it's doing, then I can plug my voice in and start putting it into my voice. But a note on that. Concentrated practice, as I said, is when you're doing everything, you're applying all of your brain's energy into learning the music and rehearsing the music and repeating the music. Distracted practice is when your brain and your energy are divided, split. So you're listening to a TV show and you're practicing during the commercials, but you're always hearing something else. Or when you are doing the dishes and you're kind of mouthing the words along. Or when you're working out and your body is under stress, but you're also kind of thinking about your text. Distracted practice. I find the majority of my practice time goes to distracted practice because I don't always have an hour and a half to literally sit and just focus on my music without being tired, or because usually I'm learning stuff on the road while I'm doing other things. So if you have nothing else to do and you can do concentrated practice 80% of your time, marvelous. You're going to learn your role 10 times faster. If you don't, and you can only do concentrated practice for like a couple of hours a week if you're lucky, and the rest of the time you just kind of have to try to mouth it on the side when you're doing other stuff, when you're vacuuming or you're picking up your room or whatever it is that you're doing. That kind of practicing I find is just not as fast for me to learn everything, but that kind of practicing I do need. It's kind of the way that I test and know that I'm memorized. If I can wash the dishes and sing the entire aria without making a mistake and without having to think of, oh, what's my next line? I know I'm memorized. So my distracted practice, how well I do in my distracted practice is my gauge of how well I know the piece. And it's also my gauge of what I need to do during my concentrated practice session. So while I'm running, when I run almost every day, you guys know. During my run, I never listen to music because headphones drive me crazy. While I'm doing that, I'm going over music in my head. I can't help it, I just do. And that's part of my distracted practice. So my body's doing one thing, but my brain's doing something else. And I'm thinking about my recit, or I'm thinking about my text in the aria. And that's when I go, oh, there's a hole there. Okay, and when I'm finished with my run, and I've done my shower, and I've done my thing, when I go home, I'm going to work on that one section. That's how I know what to work on. That's how I practice. I don't recommend practicing when you're sick, or when you're not well, or when you're really tired, because your brain isn't 100% focused and your voice is going to want to participate. And if you're sick or you're not well and you shouldn't be singing, you should let your voice really rest and really rest. Take your rest time seriously, and I do too. But when I'm well and I'm good, the best times for me to practice are when I'm fresh in the morning rather than in the evening, because by the time the evening rolls around, I'm tired, I might be stressed out from the day, I've already got my brain fried from all the rehearsing that I've been doing, or something happened, I'm stressed out, whatever it is. I find that my brain just is not as quick and ready to focus as it is in the morning. So if I know that I have to have a strong practice day, I need to do it the first thing I do when I get up after I work out and after I've done my breakfast or whatever. That's when I start practicing, like studying. Studying is what I should say, not really practicing, studying. And then I try to put it away for a little while, and I kind of, in my head throughout the day, I go over what I can when I can focus on it. And then before bedtime, I find that's a very good time for me to go over stuff. And not so much like just like focusing, but like before bed I might like kind of go over that one bit that I kept going over with the Comte de Grieux. Okay, pardon, mais j'étais là. And I'm sitting there in bed just making sure before I go to bed that I kind of have it. I might even take a quick peek at the score, just one more quick peek at the score when I'm in my pajamas. Okay, on oublie, or whatever it is. Okay, I've looked at it once more, so I've got it in my photograph, and I've gone through it once more, close it, and go to sleep. The next morning, I swear to God, that thing's memorized. I don't know how it happens. It's just something your brain does, when, at least my brain, when I go to sleep, it like organizes it all. So first thing in the morning, and right before you go to bed. The final thing I want to talk about is getting the role in your voice. So I can tell you what my experience is, and it varies from role to role. But the most important thing is getting it in your brain. At least for me, I have to get it in my brain. My voice will follow. I have a strong trust in my voice and myself and what's going on with me vocally, because I've built up a pretty good amount of experience of a variety of different types of roles. So if I know I'm singing a bel canto part, I know I don't have to sing it 65 times before I get to rehearsals, because I sing a lot of bel canto. I don't need to get it into my voice in the same way that I would need to get Strauss into my voice, for example, because I don't sing a lot of Strauss. So that would be something I would practice singing a heck of a lot more before I'd show up at the rehearsals. But a role that, you know, is a role that I trust myself that I can do, that I know I can tell by looking at it. I mean, you know when you're looking at it if you're capable, and if you're not, you know where the challenges are going to be. Most of the time, you don't always. Sometimes you get some surprises, but in general, I kind of get it in my voice towards the end. I always try to give myself at least 4 months to start learning a part, especially a big part like this one. I started learning this in May. The other big reason that I don't sing it too much too early is because when I've found when I start rehearsing, everything changes. If you start singing something and get really comfortable singing it a certain way, standing in your coaching or standing in your home in your comfort of your practice, or even in your practice room with a certain reverb and a certain this and that, and then you get into the rehearsal space and it's totally different, it feels really weird, and then you have to unlearn habits, and you get used to breathing here and the conductor says no, I want you to breathe there, or you get used to this tempo and the conductor says no, I want you to do that. It's much harder to then unlearn all of that if you've built a big, strong habit before you show up in rehearsals. So I have found, experience has taught me that I want to have an idea of what I'd like to do. I want to make sure that technically I can manage the problem spots or whatever, but that when I get there, I'm prepared but neutral, that the conductor can say, Lisette, I don't like that breath there. Can you put it here? Sure. Yes, I can. Why don't I do it? Okay, here we go. Blah, 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 blah. And we can figure out together what's the best way to sing the role. When you are learning a part on your own by yourself, it is one thing. When you get into a rehearsal room with your colleagues and your conductor and your director, it will morph into something completely different. No matter how much you have practiced that part, no matter how many times you have sung that part, even if it's a role you've sung 65 times, it will be different every single production you do. Because you are different, your colleagues are different, your production is different, your conductor is different, everything is different. The theater, the acoustics are different. The costume might not be very comfortable. There are going to be 100 million factors that are going to play into your interpretation of what you would consider to be the ideal way that you would interpret any given role. So the reason I'm telling you that is not to be like, be afraid, be very afraid. It's more like, be prepared, be very prepared. Be neutral, be flexible. I have found that has helped me the most. You know, I've gotten into so many situations where I got on a set that I underestimated, and the set affects the whole way that I'm singing, because there's like stairs and there's like a weird acoustical thing going on over here, and there's a costume that's crowding me a certain way, and shoes that are, honey, every thing and anything will get in the way of what you've been doing all nice and comfortable in your practice room. This is why brain practice is the most important practice for me. And making sure that I'm so memorized when I'm doing my distracted practice, I can do anything else. I can wash dishes, I can run on the street, I can get groceries, I can whatever. I can watch a television show and I know my part in the background is going on in the background all the time because it's so solid. So being solid for that reason is so incredibly important. So those are my major tips and tricks. They're not really shortcuts. I'm sorry, there are no shortcuts in this video. The only shortcut you can give yourself is, of course, the please learn your languages. It helps you tremendously, cuts your practice time in half. It makes you a more efficient singer. It makes you a more nuanced singer. It makes you a happier and healthier singer and all those things. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you found it helpful and got something out of it and maybe some tips that can help you when you are practicing a role. No matter how big or how small, every single role in every single opera is there for a reason and is extremely important and should be treated as such. No matter how short your role is, your character is there for a reason. So I hope that you apply the same amount of care and focus as you do in learning a huge part as you do in learning a tiny part, because all of those roles are important for you as an artist, important for the piece. It doesn't go on without you. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching. Take care.